I didn't plan to stay in the city that long. It was supposed to be a quick break, a cheap flight, a quiet neighborhood, a week to clear my head before going back to my apartment and my routine. The listing photos showed sunlight and palm trees, warm air, white walls, a balcony overlooking a narrow street. It looked peaceful. That was the first lie. The ride from the airport took almost an hour. Traffic moved like it was thinking about something else. The driver didn't talk. The radio hissed with static between stations. When we finally turned onto the street where I'd be staying, I noticed how empty it was. No kids, no music from open windows, just tall palm trees lining both sides like they were planted to keep something contained. The building itself was old but renovated. Fresh paint, a keypad on the gate, one flickering light above the entrance that buzzed like an insect trapped in glass. I remember thinking how quiet it felt, like the entire block had been muted. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of wet concrete and something sweet I couldn't place. The elevator didn't work. A printed sign said it hadn't worked for some time. My unit was on the third floor, the key stuck in the lock. I had to jiggle it. When the door finally opened, warm air rushed out like the apartment had been holding its breath. It was nicer than I expected. Minimal furniture, a couch, a small table, a bedroom with sliding glass doors that opened to a balcony. Outside, palm leaves scraped against each other in the wind. It sounded like whispering. I laughed at myself. Travel nerves, new place, different sounds. I unpacked slowly, letting the silence settle around me. Every now and then I heard distant traffic. Once, a siren somewhere far away. By nightfall, the temperature dropped. Not much, just enough to make the tile floor feel cold under my feet. I ordered food through an app. The delivery guy didn't come up. He called from outside the gate. "Can you meet me?" he asked. His voice sounded tight, rushed. I told him I'd come down. When I stepped onto the street, the palm trees were swaying harder than before. The fronds brushed together with a dry, papery sound, like people whispering secrets they didn't want overheard. The delivery guy handed me the bag without making eye contact. "You staying here?" he asked. "Just for a week," I said. He nodded quickly, then left before I could ask why he'd asked. I went back upstairs, locked the door, turned on the TV for background noise, but the channels kept glitching, picture freezing, audio stretching into strange, warped tones. At one point, the screen went completely black. For a second, I saw my reflection, and I could swear there was someone standing behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just the balcony doors, the curtains moving slightly in the breeze. I didn't sleep well that first night. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound I couldn't understand. Soft, rhythmic. It took a while to realize what it was. Voices. Not loud, not clear, just there, like they were coming from far below. I lay still, listening. My heart thumped so hard I could feel it in my throat. The whispers rose and fell with the wind. Sometimes they sounded like words, sometimes like someone exhaling slowly. I told myself it was leaves, or neighbors talking on their balconies. Eventually, I fell back asleep. Morning made everything feel stupid. Bright sunlight, birds hopping along the railing outside. The palm trees looked normal, harmless. I went out exploring. Coffee shops, a crowded market, noise and color and heat. The city felt alive. But when I came back to my street in the evening, the energy dropped again, like stepping into a different world. That night, the voices were louder, clearer. I stepped onto the balcony, barefoot on cold tile. The streetlights cast long shadows of the palm trunks across the pavement, and beneath them, I saw movement, dark shapes shifting around the bases of the trees, too slow to be people, too deliberate to be wind. The whispers seemed to be coming from the ground itself. I gripped the railing until my fingers hurt. Then one of the shapes lifted. It wasn't rising from the tree, it was rising from under the street. Tall, thin, unfolding like something that had been buried too long. I stumbled backward into the apartment, slammed the door. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, a message. You can hear them now. I stared at the screen. Another message appeared. They only speak to new ones. I tried calling the landlord. No answer. Tried calling the number back. Disconnected. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Whispers. Footsteps on the pavement below. Something dragging across concrete. At dawn, I finally slept. When I woke up, there was dirt on the balcony floor. Not dust, wet soil. Footprints led from the railing to the bedroom. I followed them with shaking hands. They stopped beside the bed. That was when I noticed the faint indentation on the mattress, like someone had been lying next to me, watching. I left the apartment that afternoon, packed in 10 minutes, didn't even bother folding anything. But when I reached the street, I realized something was wrong. There were more palm trees, too many. The block stretched longer than before. No cars, no people, just rows and rows of trunks disappearing into heat haze. My phone buzzed again. You heard them. Now they hear you. I started walking faster. The whispers followed, closer, under the pavement, under my footsteps, like the entire ground was breathing. I kept walking until sunset. The street never ended. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't cast by the trees anymore. They were moving on their own, slipping across the asphalt like ink in water. One reached my feet, and I finally understood what the voices were saying. They weren't whispering to each other. They were whispering my name. If you've ever stood under palm trees at night, have you ever listened closely to what they're saying? I didn't stop walking, even when my legs started trembling. Even when the heat of the day faded into a strange, cold twilight that didn't feel natural. The street just kept going. Palm trees, streetlights, empty sidewalks, over and over. At some point I realized the sky wasn't changing anymore. The sun had set, but the darkness never fully arrived. Everything was stuck in a dim gray glow, like the world had been paused. The whispers were constant now, no longer soft, no longer distant. They were right beneath my feet. Each step sounded wrong, like I was walking over something hollow, something that shifted slightly under my weight. I tried running. The sound followed, 1,000 faint voices moving faster with me. I reached an intersection that hadn't been there before. 4 identical streets branching into endless rows of trees. In the center stood a cracked concrete circle. Something was written on it, faded, almost erased by time. I crouched down and wiped away dust with my sleeve. Root zone, do not disturb. The ground vibrated gently, like something deep below had just turned in its sleep. My phone lit up again. No signal, no apps open, just the camera recording. I watched myself on the screen, standing alone in the intersection. But behind me, the pavement was moving. Dark bulges rolling slowly beneath the surface like waves under skin. I spun around. Nothing, just still concrete, still trees. When I looked back at the phone, the bulges were closer, almost at my heels. I dropped the device. It kept recording on the ground, angled upward. That's when I heard the first clear word. A voice, not whispered, spoken, right beside my ear. Stay. My lungs locked, my vision blurred at the edges. The air smelled like wet soil and something rotting beneath it. I forced myself to move. I chose a random street and started walking again. The trees here were taller, their trunks thicker. The leaves didn't move in the wind anymore. They moved, on their own, slowly turning toward me, watching. I started noticing things nailed into the bark. Old license plates, faded photographs, pieces of clothing hardened by time, proof that other people had come here and never left. Somewhere ahead, a porch light flickered. A house, the first building I'd seen since leaving the apartment. Hope surged through me so fast it hurt. I ran toward it, The front door was open. Inside, the air was colder than outside. The smell of earth was stronger. The floorboards creaked under my steps. There was no furniture, just a narrow hallway leading to the back of the house. At the end, a staircase descending into darkness. The whispers were loudest there, like a crowd gathered below. My phone buzzed again. It had somehow returned to my pocket. Another message. This is where they started. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Something moved in the blackness. Not climbing, not rising, just waiting. The walls around me began to tremble, fine dust falling from the ceiling. Outside, I could hear the palm leaves scraping together in a frantic rhythm, like applause, like encouragement. I don't know why I stepped down. Maybe because there was nowhere else to go. Maybe because the voices had already decided. The first step felt soft. The second felt wet. By the third, I realized I wasn't walking on wood anymore. I was walking on packed soil. The darkness swallowed the last light behind me, and deep underground, something enormous shifted. If you've ever heard trees in the wind at night, have you ever wondered what might be listening back? I kept going down. There was no turning back anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because the staircase behind me was gone. I didn't hear it collapse. I didn't feel anything move. It was just not there. One moment there were steps leading up into faint gray light. The next there was only soil, packed tight like it had never been disturbed. The air was thick. Every breath tasted like old roots in stagnant water. My phone screen was the only light now. Its glow barely reached a few feet ahead of me, and what it revealed made my stomach twist. The walls weren't dirt. They were layered, tree roots, thousands of them, braided together into tunnels that pulsed slowly like veins. I could feel vibrations traveling through them, deep, rhythmic tremors like a heartbeat. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were conversations. Overlapping voices speaking in languages I couldn't recognize. Some sounded young, some sounded ancient. All of them sounded tired. My foot hit something soft. I looked down. A shoe, still tied, still holding part of a foot inside. I staggered back, slipping on the damp ground. That's when the roots moved. They didn't lash out. They didn't attack. They just made space, opening like curtains, revealing a massive chamber stretching far beyond what my phone light could reach. And in the center, a tree. Not like the ones outside. This one had no leaves. Its bark was pale and smooth, almost human in texture. Faces were pressed into its trunk, hundreds of them, eyes closed, mouths open, as if frozen mid-scream. The whispers were coming from them, all of them at once. My phone vibrated again. Another message. You found us. I didn't type anything. My hands were shaking too badly. The camera switched on by itself. The screen showed the chamber from above, a bird's eye view. I could see myself standing at the edge like a tiny, dark speck, and I could see the roots, moving. Not randomly, they were converging, slowly sliding toward me from every direction. I ran, or at least I tried to. The ground sucked at my shoes like mud. The air thickened until each step felt like pushing through water. A new voice spoke then, not from the tree, from inside my head, calm, patient. You heard us first. That means you belong deeper. The roots reached my ankles, cold, stronger than any rope. I fell hard, the phone flying from my hand. It landed screen up, still recording. I watched myself struggle on that tiny glowing rectangle while something dragged me backward across the soil, toward the tree, toward the faces. Some of them were moving now, eyes opening, following me, recognizing me. One face near the base smiled weakly. I knew that face. It was mine, older, sunken, as if it had been waiting there for years. The last thing I remember was the sound. Not screaming, not pain, just the sound of palm leaves far above, rustling in a wind that no longer reached me. My phone was later found on the sidewalk outside my apartment, still recording, still showing the same dim, underground chamber. Police say it's just corrupted footage, a digital glitch. But sometimes, late at night, my friends tell me they hear something when they play the video. A faint voice layered under the static, calling their names. If you ever walk under palm trees and hear whispering beneath your feet, will you stop to listen?